Let's talk about the ideal rate of weight gain because there's a lot of fallacies surrounding this topic. And what people need to understand is that when you are in a weight class sport or in a sport like bodybuilding, where you're at the end are going to have to get to a very particular body fat percentage to optimize performance. When it comes to endeavors like this, the amount of fat you gain during hypertrophy phases matters, and it matters a lot. Let's take the example of a weight class sport such as powerlifting or wrestling or MMA or whatever it may be. What's the point of going through hypertrophy? The end goal is to improve body composition for a specific weight class. But in the chase to gain muscle, you gain a ton of fat, let's say it's 50-50, that is not going to be advantageous because eventually you are going to have to lose that fat, or at the very least, you're not going to optimize body composition as well as you otherwise could. So there's a lot of classic approaches to gaining muscle within the sport of powerlifting. In fact, you'll see guides to doing so all the time, where the guide will name a very famous powerlifter and it'll talk about what they did to get to these numbers and this weight class. And a lot of those suggestions are just a shit show. It is suggestions like they started the day with an extra large pizza and poured a pound of olive oil on top, and then for lunch they had 4 McDonald's McTriples or whatever it may be, so on and so forth. Just the worst food choices imaginable, and the goal seems to be getting to the largest caloric surplus possible, and that's how we gain muscle. Right? Wrong, or at least not my opinion of how we should be doing it. I've had a lot of success in the past when it comes to hypertrophy, right? I've gone from starting in this industry at 170 pounds, getting all the way up to 250 pounds, many years to get there, and I learned a lot of lessons on the way. I've tried it this way. I've tried it with the no holds bar, just gain as quickly and as much as possible, and I've also tried it with a lot more slow, methodical approach. I'm telling you, the latter is better. It's better for performance, it's better for health, it's better for the individual, it's better for body composition, better for virtually everything. Let's talk about some research that validates this though, and what research shows is that when it comes to hypertrophy, when it comes to weight gain, the tortoise beats the hare. There's 2 specific studies that I want to look at today. The first of which was a 2019 study on natural bodybuilders with about a 6 time a week training frequency. And what they did was they split these bodybuilders into 2 groups, a small caloric surplus group and a large caloric surplus group. The small caloric surplus group was in that 200 to 300 calorie surplus range, while the larger was in that 500 to 600 calorie surplus range. And what this study actually found was that the larger surplus group gained 3 times as much body fat with no advantage in muscle gained. Both groups gained muscle. The only major difference is that the larger surplus group gained 3 times more body fat. And we're talking about a population of people that has to be at a certain body fat percentage by the time they get on stage. So no difference in muscle gain. Only difference in body fat gain. So now the larger caloric surplus group created a situation where they have to lose exponentially more body fat by the time they compete. Clearly, the 200 to 300 calorie surplus group had the better strategy, the better result at the very least. Now, the second study was in 2013, and it was done on elite level sport athletes in an upper lower body training split. Now, if I remember correctly, these were track athletes, almost certain they were track athletes, in fact. Group 1 was told to eat to gain weight. They were given no nutritional guidance whatsoever. While Group 2 met with nutritionists and received individualized meal plans. Now, when it is all said and done, the Group 2, the ones that met with nutritionists, averaged 500 calories more per day than Group 1. Though both groups were in a caloric surplus. Both groups achieved the caloric surplus beautifully. It's just that Group 2, the ones that met with nutritionists, averaged 500 more calories per day. Now, the finding was that Group 2, keep in mind, this is the one that met with nutritionists, Group 2 gained 5 times more body fat with only a slight, very slight advantage in muscle gain. Sit with that for a second. That really, I had to read the study multiple times to even make sense of it. It's crazy. because group 2 had such a big advantage. They met with nutritionists. Now, to be fair, there is one little caveat to the study. These were well-established and elite-level track athletes. So if you did this with like the average high school athlete and you just told them to eat to gain weight, they may not even achieve a surplus. That's important to note. But when you look at the differences in caloric surplus, a larger caloric surplus group gained 5 times more body fat, only small advantage in muscle gained, and performance tests were done at the end of this study. In group 2, the one that gained 5 times more body fat, ran slower and jumped lower, which is kind of important for the sport of track. So with this being said, all of that to say that when you're looking to gain muscle, the tortoise oftentimes beats the hare. Now, there is one more caveat I want to go over. They're far and few between, but I'm actually working with a client right now who wants to gain as much weight as possible and likes body fat gain. Wants body fat gain. For this population, even though they're rare, large caloric surplus is the way to go. If they are okay, in fact, they're inviting body fat gain with muscle, and they don't compete in a weight class sport, they don't need to get down to a certain body fat percentage. If that's the case, again, very rare, but if that's the case, hey, larger caloric surplus, let's get it. And it's going to make it a lot easier. Let's eat as much as possible, eat everything in sight. But again, that's a very rare occasion, but that is important to note because in general, for the vast majority of people, again, tortoise beats the hare. The smaller caloric surplus group is what I bias towards. It's what I've had a lot more success with and what I believe to be, along with most people believe to be, the better approach. But at the same time, there are a small percentage of people that may be outside of that recommendation due to their goal being very specific. But I think that's about it for now. Understand that the ideal rate of weight gain is not a contest of who can get into the best caloric surplus possible. Instead, there's a little bit more nuance to it, and usually we should bias towards a smaller caloric surplus, especially if we are in a weight class sport or a sport where we need to get down to a certain body fat percentage by the time we compete, like bodybuilding. When working with older populations, there are some specific nuances around protein intake we have to consider, because when working with them, we are trying to avoid this word sarcopenia, or the age-related loss in muscle mass. And it doesn't matter if you're working with somebody who's just trying to improve functionality, that's trying to avoid sarcopenia, that's trying to improve their performance within a strength sport, whatever it may be. There's one specific factor that we need to talk about that this study right here really explains in a fantastic manner, and that is a study by Mortal in 2015. And what it did was it compared different protein boluses in 2 very distinct age populations and how their body responded to it from a muscle protein synthesis perspective. So what they compared was a group of 20 to 27-year-olds versus a group of 60 to 75-year-olds. So obviously a very large difference in age here. And what it compared was a 10, 20, 30, and 40 gram bolus of protein. And what it actually found was that the younger population, the individuals between the ages of 20 and 27, at 10 grams, 20 grams, and 30 grams of protein, had a much better muscle protein synthesis response compared to the compared to the older group or older population of people. It was a big difference between age groups. But when the protein bolus got to 40 grams, the response became the same. Only at 40 grams did the response become the same. So what I'm trying to say here is that the older population had a much lesser response as far as muscle protein synthesis goes at 10, 20, 30, but it became the same at 40 grams. And what this study shows, along with many other studies out there, is that older populations need larger protein boluses at each meal to maximize their muscle protein synthesis response. So ideally, with older populations especially, let's say they have a protein intake goal of 160 grams of protein per day. Well, ideally, that would be spread across 4 feedings or 4 protein boluses, each of which at 40 grams of protein, because unfortunately, a lot of these people have protein boluses or protein feedings meals, they consume meals that are not nearly enough. or their meals throughout the day just differentiate very widely. So their breakfast might be 10 grams and then their lunch might be 50 grams, whatever it may be. But in an ideal scenario, they're getting something closer to the situation that I just described. Each meal is about a 40-gram bolus of protein or above, and then they still end up getting to their total daily goal. And the example I gave was 164 meals or 4 protein boluses throughout the day. So by doing this, they can really maximize muscle protein synthesis, improve their performance, improve their recovery, and help to avoid that word that we all hate to hear. That word is sarcopenia.